Growing up, we would say, we're all part of the body of God, but we're probably the brains.
Abraham's fortune. If you approach things through that academic mindset and that's how you connect with God, like that's going to be one of the most enriching ways for you to interact with God. Versus some of
Oh,
these
yeah.
others, like everybody has their thing. Some people it's through prayer, some people it's through a specific, maybe it's like the Psalms, so more like the song side of the Bible. And yeah, everybody has their way of connecting with God. Some people it's going out into nature, and you seem very academic minded, and I think you've said that a couple of times. So that seems to be your gateway to getting to know God better.
Yeah, it's like one aspect of my faith. The interesting thing is, like, when I met you, when I was living in Northern Ontario, it was like the first couple years after I had graduated from university. And the interesting thing is, there wasn't a church of the denomination I had grown up in that town. And so I found myself I was attending a Pentecostal church and going to a Bible study, at a brethren church, with like people from like Baptist and Pentecostal and Brethren and Catholic and like multiple other backgrounds. And so it was very interesting. And I would say that that time, I did learn to become a little bit more emotional about my faith, which was interesting. It is something that, like, as much as like I had always been like, oh, Pentecostal, they're like the crazy Christians.
Yeah. I feel like there's a bias in some denominations that they are that, but I've also been involved in several Pentecostal churches, and I come from a background that also has that they're the crazy ones kind of mindset. So to see like the richness that can be found there is really interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like growing up, we would say, we're all part of the body of God, but we're probably the brains, which was super arrogant. But
Yeah,
it was kind of
just a
this
little.
like, oh, those strange Pentecostals, and they're part of the body of God, but oh man, maybe they're like the toes.
Ouch.
The wiggly jazz fingers. I don't know.
I like that analogy, jazz fingers. I,
But I was in Bible study I remember talking to someone, and she was like, she would listen to like a sermon or six every day.
well,
And just like this hunger for studying. I did kind of feel that, like, I felt sorry that she didn't have anyone giving her steak, like a good theological steak. But she was like so hungry and thirsty, and so like that sort of emotional connection to faith was really fun to see. And I really appreciated learning from them. I also appreciated learning how to like occasionally like respond emotionally appropriately about my faith, like as I'm singing a worship song about like raising your hands in praise, like feeling like, oh, okay, I can do this.
yeah.
I'm not being smite. There's no lightning coming from the sky. So that sort of thing was fun. And like, oh, we can clap our hands. The
Yeah.
fun thing, there's a song in our hymnal in our church called "The Trees of the Field Will Clap Their Hands." Like, you shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills will break forth, and the trees of the field will clap their hands. And like the whole chorus is about we'll clap their hands. And it's even like musically notated, written like where you're supposed to clap
Yeah.
your hands, and we'll all just be like
Scared to do it.
scared to clap.
Yeah.
It's so fun. But that's just like, I think that's much more of our like reserved Dutch culture.
Some people connect more through that reserved nature. Like if they tend to be more a reserved person, like that can be how a lot of people connect to God. But it only becomes a problem when we put it as this is the only way you can. Because even like you go to some Pentecostal churches and they're the opposite, where they're too, if you're not raising your hands, you're not a real Christian. So it's on both sides.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I did struggle with that at the Pentecostal church. I felt that, like, because I grew up in a denomination where I was baptized as an infant. And then you go through theological training and catechism instruction and um, interview with the elders and deacons of the church before you can become and do your public profession of faith and become a professing member in the church. And so that was my like background in the church. And I felt that like while I was attending the Pentecostal church, they were just waiting for me to like decide to truly be baptized as an adult.
Oh, interesting.
And I was always just like, no, because like I really cherished my baptism as an infant because I truly feel that like I have been growing in my faith since a child.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do know there were people who were baptized as infants and they really never connected with their faith until an adult. And so for them, like many of them do choose to be baptized again because for them it's just this really like affirming their faith and
Mm-hmm.
claiming that as their own. But I felt like I don't know, I felt this like sort of pressure, but also this like no, because I do not want to deny that like
Mm-hmm.
that growth that I felt that's been my entire life. Like
Yeah.
that's um yeah, that was all of my faith development and like my baptism was totally valid even though I
Mm-hmm.
was only a couple weeks old.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I really like that mindset because some people don't connect with it at that age, and like it really depends what your own unique journey is, right? And for you, you connected with it. So why would you redo it?
Yeah, and I also feel that like I do appreciate the idea of baptism as an infant and like people will be like, "Oh, but the infant doesn't even understand what's happening and it's more of like the parents' decision." But I'm like to me it's very symbolic of it's not me making a decision, but it's that like God's call on my life. Like
Hmm.
God's action and calling and drawing me because like if it was just up to me, I don't know. I don't know where I'd be, but like
Hmm.
I
And
really think that it's God like always calling me and leading me throughout my entire life. And so
mhm.
like that the fact that I was baptized before I even knew what was going on, like to me that's much more symbolic of what baptism means, but
Yeah,
that's my interpretation. I
yeah,
know that
and
there's like also many different others.
yeah, and I think there's like the communal aspect as well, right? When you have a baby getting baptized, it's like the community saying we're going to lead them in the way of faith as well. So it is that call of God, and then there's that element because when you read like biblical passages of people getting baptized, like someone will get saved, and then them and their entire household gets baptized.
Yep.
So it used to be a very different representation where it was kind of like the head of household gets saved, everybody else gets baptized. I'm sure some of those, especially back then when they had slaves and that, you didn't have a choice. It's not like you were like, oh yeah, I'm going to get baptized too. It just happened. Like you were told to and you did. So,
Yeah.